Welcome back to the evolution of Formula One, the ultimate pit stop for everything Formula One. Today's video is about the top 10 craziest Formula One superstitions. As we all know, Formula One is all about precision, engineering, and strategy. But sometimes, even the best drivers believe in a little bit of good luck. From lucky helmets to bizarre rituals, F1 history is packed with some of the most superstitious figures in motorsport. Let's go decade by decade as we dive into the weird world of F1 superstitions. Alberto Ascari was a two-time F1 world champion in 1952 and 1953 for Ferrari. He had a very strict superstition. He always wore his lucky blue helmet whenever he raced. He often matched this with a blue polo shirt and gloves. These days, drivers put their faith in aerodynamics and engineering, but Ascari put his faith in this blue helmet. But in 1955, at Monza, he made an unexpected appearance at a Ferrari test event. He decided to do a few laps in Eugenio Castellotti's Ferrari, but crashed at the Curva del Vialone, a corner that would later bear his name. Bizarrely for him, he drove without his beloved helmet. Some say his lucky blue helmet was being repaired after being damaged 4 days earlier when his car went off the track in the Monaco Grand Prix and landed in the sea. Tragically, he died at this event in Monza. Eerily, it was on May 26th, the exact same day his father, also a racer, had died years earlier. They were both 36 years old when they died, and both had exactly 13 Grand Prix wins. You couldn't make it up if you tried. Unless, of course, you were an overly dramatic Netflix producer. It's a chilling reminder that in motorsport, superstitions might not add downforce, but they sure seem to carry weight. Funnily, back in the 1950s, many F1 drivers refused to be photographed before a race. They feared that the next day's newspapers would feature their smiling faces under the grim headline, "Last photo ever taken." Was this just superstition? Maybe it was. But let's be real. It probably had a lot more to do with the fact that F1 safety back then was about as advanced as Ferrari's 2022 strategy calls. Back then, F1 drivers had two main objectives on race day. 1. Finish the race. 2. Still be alive to tell the tale. In today's F1, drivers spend hours doing photo shoots, TikToks, and pre-race interviews. They even get elevated onto podiums in Las Vegas before the race. But in the 50s, if a photographer came looking for a pre-race shot, they'd be lucky if their camera wasn't smashed like Toto Wolff's headphones. The number 13 in motorsport is about as likeable as Lawrence Stroll in Formula One. The number was banished by team bosses like Colin Chapman, Jack Brabham, Bruce McLaren, John Surtees, and Ken Tyrrell. Chapman, being the genius and superstitious lunatic he was, went so extreme his cars went from the Lotus Type 12 to the Lotus Elite GT, which was number 14. The fear of 13 in motor racing came when there were several incidents in France in the 1920s, and it seemed to spread across Europe quicker than Max Verstappen. The number 13 was more cursed than the number 2 driver's seat with Red Bull. The number 13 became the black cat of F1 and only made rare appearances in 1963 with Mexican Moises Solana and then by Davina Galica in 1976. Even when the Constructors' Championship order was introduced, they literally skipped the number 13. Yes, that's right, even in a sport where every single detail comes down to complex engineering, people were worried about using the number 13. Then came 2014, when drivers got to pick their own permanent racing numbers. Enter Pastor Maldonado, a man already known for treating F1 cars like bumper cars. He saw 13 sitting there, unloved, and thought, yep, that's the one for me. However, the less said about those 2 seasons with 13 on his car, the better. If anything, his stint with 13 only reinforced why everyone else avoided it, like Yuki Tsunoda avoiding workouts. Niki Lauda was the human embodiment of superstition is for the weak. While other F1 drivers had lucky socks, enter the cars from only the left side, or performed bizarre pre-race rituals, Lauda's only ritual was being faster and smarter than everyone else. No lucky charms, no nonsense, just pure racing precision. And then 1976 happened. Lauda's near-fatal crash at the Nürburgring was so terrifying that even Final Destination would have rejected the script as too unrealistic. Somehow, Lauda cheated death, returned to racing just 6 weeks later, and promptly started rethinking his stance on fate. Suddenly, the driver who once laughed at superstitions was believing in fate. By 1977, Lauda was taking no chances. He straight up refused to race at Hockenheim because he had a bad feeling about it. Unfortunately for Lauda, he had to learn the hard way about fate. In the end, you could call it superstition, or maybe even PTSD, given his accident was so severe. Number 6. Ayrton Senna is one of the most talented F1 drivers of all time, but he was deeply religious and prayed before every race. He believed his connection with God gave him an advantage on the track. His final race weekend, Imola 1994, was full of eerie premonitions, including him mentioning a dark feeling about the event. The very first world champion in 1950, Nino Farina, was much aligned with Senna, and he believed his faith in God secured him his world title. Like many other F1 drivers, Stefano Modena had a ritual of always getting into his car from the left side. This is a pretty common ritual with many drivers. However, during pre-qualifying in Brazil in 1989, Modena took his superstition to a whole new level of diva driver. The Brabham team had to move all their equipment and cars into a different garage, which had been vacated by another team. The team of mechanics spent hours sweating, lifting, and shifting every single piece of equipment to get things set up. Modena strolled in like a model on a catwalk, but he went crazy about his car being on the left side of the garage. He wanted it on the right-hand side of the garage. He threw his toys out of the pram, so then all the mechanics had to move all the equipment and his car to the right-hand side. Don't think it made any difference to his performances, though. Alan Jones was as tough as they come. A hard-nosed Aussie with a no-nonsense attitude, a killer instinct on track, and absolutely zero tolerance for anything soft. Except, of course, for his lucky red underpants. Flashback to Canada, 1980, Jones was on the verge of securing his first and only F1 World Championship in the final race of the season. The stakes were high, the pressure was immense, and then disaster struck. He couldn't find his sacred lucky underpants. Suddenly, the usually fearless Williams driver was sweating more than Nicholas Latifi's mechanics on race day. He was so rattled, he almost refused to race. That's right, years of hard work, countless laps, and an entire championship season were about to be undone by his missing underwear. Amazingly, his wife became the real hero of the day. She raced to his motorhome, probably setting an unofficial fastest lap, retrieved the all-important magic pants, and got them back to him just in time. Jones, now reunited with his lucky underpants of destiny, went on to win the title, leaving skid marks on the track and not in his pants, thankfully. And before you judge, he wasn't alone. David Coulthard had a lucky pair he wore for years, and so too did Felipe Massa. The lesson? Forget aerodynamics, horsepower, and race strategy. If you want to be an F1 champion, don't forget your lucky pants. Michael Schumacher's 2010 comeback with Mercedes had everyone talking. Would the 7-time world champion roll back the years and dominate again? Could he teach young Nico Rosberg a thing or two? And, most importantly, why was he asking to swap race numbers? Was this Schumacher playing mind games before the season even started? A sneaky attempt to establish himself as Mercedes' top dog before even turning a wheel? It turns out, Schumacher just really didn't like even numbers. Mercedes confirmed that he simply preferred odd numbers, and given his track record of winning all 7 of his titles in odd-numbered cars, 5 with number 1, 1 with number 3, and 1 with number 5, you can't really blame him. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just renumber it. But Schumacher's quirky superstitions didn't stop there. Back in 2004, he had a pre-race panic attack in Bahrain when he realized he'd forgotten his lucky ceramic amulet in his hotel room. Given to him by his wife and featuring the initials of his family members, this tiny trinket was apparently the real MVP of Ferrari's dominance. A team member raced back to retrieve it, Schumacher won the race, and later said the amulet had perhaps made the decisive difference. Because drama follows F1 like DRS follows a backstraight, it happened again at Silverstone. The amulet mysteriously disappeared, only to be returned by a kind stranger. At this point, you have to wonder, was Ferrari's real secret to success a perfect V10 engine, Ross Brawn strategies, or just one very powerful lucky charm? Either way, even the GOAT had his rituals. When you've won 91 races and 7 world titles, you don't take chances. You swap numbers, you retrieve lost trinkets, and you make sure your lucky charm is within arm's reach at all times. Modern F1 drivers are obsessed with keeping their weight down. Every gram counts when you're trying to shave tenths off a lap time. But Sebastian Vettel wasn't about to let aerodynamics and physics stop him from stuffing his race suit pockets full of lucky charms. Over the years, Vettel has turned his pockets into a mobile shrine of good fortune. Among his prized possessions, a small metal pig, because why not? And a 1-cent coin he found on the street in Indianapolis just before his F1 debut in 2007. Clearly that coin had some serious downforce-enhancing properties because Vettel went on to become a 4-time world champion. But his most iconic superstition, his race boots. If you ever caught a glimpse before a Grand Prix, you might have noticed 2 shining silver pieces tucked under his laces, gifts from his grandmother, including a St. Christopher medal. Because if you're going to travel at 200 miles per hour, you might as well have the patron saint of travelers riding shotgun. And of course, Vettel also stuck to one of F1's most time-honoured superstitions, always getting into the car from the same side. Apparently, even in a sport of precision engineering, cutting-edge technology, and multi-million-dollar simulation tools, nothing beats good old-fashioned superstition. With 46 wins and 4 world titles, you have to admit, Vettel's lucky charms weren't just along for the ride. They were probably part of the race strategy. All he needs now is a lucky charm for climate change. F1 drivers love customizing their helmets with flags, slogans, and the occasional massive corporate logo. But Sergio Perez took things a step further. He didn't just personalize his lid, he personalized his entire cockpit. A devout Catholic, Checo carries an image of Pope John Paul II inside his car, ever since the late pontiff shook his hand back in the 2000s. I really felt a big connection to him, Perez explained. Considering his legendary tyre-saving skills, we can only assume divine intervention plays a role. How else do you explain turning dead rubber into podiums? Perez firmly believes the Pope gives him extra strength on track, which might explain why he's been F1's ultimate defensive driver. Just ask Lewis Hamilton about Abu Dhabi 2021. While some drivers trust their engineers, Perez clearly prefers a bit of spiritual telemetry. Unfortunately for Perez, Pope John Paul nor Pope Francis could keep any driver in that haunted second seat at Red Bull. Perez and Christian Horner would not be aligned in terms of faith, that's for sure. Meanwhile, his former teammate Nico Hülkenberg also had a personal touch inside his car. But his was less divine inspiration and more Saturday morning cartoon. Hülkenberg reportedly had a picture of Johnny Bravo taped inside his cockpit. Whether as motivation, superstition, or a mechanic's prank remains a mystery. Maybe the logic was simple. If you can't get a podium, at least you can have great hair. Maybe Hülkenberg should try a pair of lucky red underpants for 2025. That concludes our top 10 superstitions in Formula 1. Don't forget to comment below and let us know. Which F1 superstition was your favourite? Or even better, if you were an F1 driver, what superstition would you bring to the sport? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe to Formula 1 Evolution for my videos.